There's a mental framework operating beneath the surface of every world-class performer you admire. It's not charisma, it's not talent, it's not even hard work. It's something far more precise, a psychological infrastructure that's been refined through centuries of human achievement, from ancient battlefields to modern boardrooms. Most people will never know it exists because it hides in plain sight, disguised as natural ability. But once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. How ancient warriors turned mental chaos into surgical precision under extreme pressure. Think about the moment right before a life or death decision. Your mind races, your body tenses, every instinct screams at you to react. Now imagine being able to silence all of that noise in a single breath and make the perfect move anyway. That's not superhuman, it's trained. And the blueprint for this kind of mental control was carved out thousands of years ago by warriors who understood something most modern humans have forgotten. Your mind is either your greatest weapon or your worst enemy. The samurai of feudal Japan weren't just skilled swordsmen, they were psychological architects. Their entire training system revolved around a principle called mushin, which translates to no mind, or empty mind. This wasn't about being passive or checked out. It was about achieving a state of total presence, where thought doesn't interfere with action. When a samurai faced an opponent, hesitation meant death. Overthinking meant death. Fear meant death. So they trained their minds to operate beyond those limitations, entering a flow state where reaction and intention became one seamless movement. Here's what makes this fascinating. Modern neuroscience has caught up to what these warriors knew intuitively. When you're in a state of high stress, your brain defaults to the amygdala, the fear center. This triggers fight or flight responses that flood your system with cortisol and adrenaline, clouding judgment and narrowing your focus to survival mode. But elite performers, whether athletes, surgeons, or military operators, train their prefrontal cortex to override that automatic response. They create what researchers call cognitive flexibility, the ability to remain calm and strategic even when everything around them is on fire. The samurai achieved this through relentless practice of zazen, a form of seated meditation that rewired their nervous systems to stay grounded in chaos. But it wasn't just about sitting quietly. They integrated this mental discipline into every aspect of their lives. The tea ceremony, calligraphy, even the way they walked, all of it was training. Because they understood that the mind doesn't switch on for battle and switch off for daily life. The way you show up in small moments determines how you'll perform in critical ones. If you let your mind wander during routine tasks, it will betray you when stakes are high. That's why the samurai code, Bushido, demanded constant vigilance over one's thoughts and emotions. It was a full-time commitment to mental mastery. And here's the paradox that trips most people up. True mental control isn't about forcing your mind into submission. It's about learning to observe it without being controlled by it. The samurai practiced kensho, sudden awakening, where they would experience brief moments of pure awareness, seeing their thoughts as passing clouds rather than absolute truths. This gave them an incredible advantage. They could recognize fear, doubt, or anger without being hijacked by those emotions. They could feel pressure without collapsing under it. They could face uncertainty without freezing. This same mental framework is being used today by Navy SEALs, professional athletes, and high-stakes negotiators. The language has changed, but the principle remains: master your internal state, and you master your performance. The question is, why do so few people actually develop this skill? Because it requires something most aren't willing to give. And that's exactly what we're about to uncover. Why do elite negotiators and crisis responders operate on a completely different mental frequency? Let's shift from ancient battlefields to modern high-pressure scenarios. Imagine you're a hostage negotiator. Someone's life hangs in the balance. The person on the other end of the line is unstable, armed, and unpredictable. You have one chance to say the right thing. One wrong word, one hint of fear or uncertainty in your voice, and everything falls apart. What's the difference between the negotiator who saves lives and the one who escalates the situation? It's not just training or experience. It's mental frequency, the ability to operate from a state of absolute clarity while everyone else is drowning in emotion. Elite crisis responders are trained in something called tactical empathy, a technique developed by former FBI negotiator Chris Voss. But before they can even apply these communication strategies, they have to master something more fundamental: emotional regulation. Because if you can't control your own nervous system, you can't influence anyone else's. These professionals spend years learning to recognize the physical signs of stress: elevated heart rate, shallow breathing, muscle tension, and then systematically reverse them in real time. They slow their breath. They soften their voice. They create internal calm even when external chaos is screaming at them. This isn't just psychological theory, it's measurable physiology. When you control your breathing, you activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which counteracts the stress response. Your heart rate variability improves, which has been directly linked to better decision-making and emotional resilience. The Navy SEALs use a technique called box breathing: inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4 to stay composed during combat operations. Hostage negotiators use similar methods to maintain their mental edge during hours-long standoffs. They understand that the person with the most regulated nervous system has the psychological advantage. But here's what separates the good from the great. Elite performers don't just regulate their emotions, they use them strategically. A skilled negotiator can feel fear and still project confidence. They can experience frustration without letting it color their tone. They develop what psychologists call emotional granularity, the ability to identify and label specific emotions with precision. Most people just feel bad or stressed. Elite performers can distinguish between anxiety, irritation, disappointment, and fatigue, and that level of awareness allows them to respond appropriately rather than reactively. There's a similar principle in military strategy. The ancient Chinese general Sun Tzu wrote that the greatest victory is the one achieved without fighting. But to avoid unnecessary conflict, you must have absolute clarity about your own position and your opponent's. That requires a calm mind. A mind clouded by emotion sees threats everywhere and makes rash decisions. A disciplined mind assesses the situation accurately and chooses the most effective path forward. Modern military operators are trained in tactical patience, the ability to wait for the perfect moment to act rather than rushing in out of adrenaline or ego. And this extends beyond crisis situations. Think about high-level business negotiations, surgical procedures, or even parenting a toddler during a meltdown. The person who can maintain their composure has control of the situation. The person who gets emotionally hijacked loses all leverage. That's why emotional discipline isn't just a personal development nice to have, it's a strategic advantage in every domain of human performance. The question is, are you training this skill, or are you leaving it to chance? What if the real battle isn't with deadlines or competition, but with your own untrained mind? Here's a truth most people avoid. The biggest obstacle to your success isn't your competition, your circumstances, or your resources. It's the undisciplined noise between your ears. You have approximately 60,000 thoughts per day, and most of them are repetitive, negative, or completely irrelevant to what you're trying to accomplish. That mental chatter drains your energy, fractures your focus, and convinces you that overwhelm is just part of the game. But elite performers know something different. They know the mind is trainable, and once you train it, everything changes. Let's talk about what happens when you don't train your mind. You wake up and immediately check your phone, flooding your brain with information before you've even set an intention for the day. You sit down to work, but within minutes you're bouncing between tasks, chasing dopamine hits from notifications and instant gratification. You try to focus, but your mind keeps pulling you into worst-case scenarios about the future or regrets about the past. By the end of the day, you're exhausted not from meaningful work, but from the constant internal friction of a mind that's never learned discipline. Now contrast that with someone who has a trained mind. They wake up and take 10 minutes to center themselves, maybe through meditation, journaling, or a simple breathing practice. They set clear intentions for the day, identifying the 2 or 3 things that actually matter. When they sit down to work, they eliminate distractions and enter a state of deep focus. And when their mind tries to wander because it will, they gently redirect it without judgment. They're not superhuman. They're just practicing a skill that most people never bother to develop. This is where ancient philosophy meets modern performance science. The Stoics understood that you can't control external events, but you have absolute control over your internal responses. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, spent his evenings writing reminders to himself about this very principle. His meditations weren't meant for public consumption, they were his personal training manual for staying mentally sharp under the crushing weight of leading an empire. He knew that without daily mental discipline, he'd be swept away by the chaos of ruling Rome. Today's top performers do the same thing. They journal, they meditate, they review their days and course correct. Not because it's trendy, but because it works. Research on habit formation and neuroplasticity shows that consistent mental training literally rewires your brain. You strengthen the neural pathways associated with focus, resilience, and emotional regulation. You weaken the pathways associated with distraction, rumination, and reactivity. It's not magic, it's biology. But here's the uncomfortable part. This requires daily commitment. You can't just read about mental discipline and expect results. You have to practice it every single day, even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it, because the mind is like a muscle, it atrophies without use, and most people's minds have been atrophying for years. So here's what I want you to do. Comment one word below: focus. That word represents your commitment to start training your mind intentionally. Then answer this: what's the one mental habit that's been holding you back the most? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this message resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel, because we're just getting started on uncovering the mental architecture of peak performance. How do hackers, chess masters, and Navy SEALs all use the same mental operating system? If you think mental discipline is only for monks and philosophers, you're missing the bigger picture. The same psychological framework we've been discussing is actively deployed every day by people operating in the highest stakes environments imaginable. Hackers breaking into secure systems. Chess grandmasters playing blindfolded against multiple opponents. Navy SEALs executing missions where one mistake costs lives. These people don't just think differently, they've trained their minds to function at a level most people can't even comprehend. Take ethical hackers, for example. When they're probing a system for vulnerabilities, they're not just running automated scripts. They're thinking 10 moves ahead, anticipating how security protocols will respond, looking for patterns invisible to less trained eyes. But here's the key: they can only see those patterns because their minds aren't cluttered with anxiety, impatience, or ego. They've trained themselves to enter a state of what hackers call flow state, where time seems to slow down, irrelevant information fades away, and their entire cognitive capacity focuses on the problem at hand. That's not luck. That's a cultivated mental state. Chess masters operate the same way. When a grandmaster looks at a board, they don't see individual pieces, they see patterns, possibilities, threats that won't materialize for 5 or 6 moves. Studies show that elite chess players can hold multiple complex scenarios in their working memory simultaneously while remaining completely calm. How? Because they've trained their minds to filter out noise and process only what matters. They've developed what cognitive scientists call chunking, the ability to compress complex information into manageable units. But more importantly, they've mastered emotional detachment from the outcome. A chess master doesn't panic when they're down material. They stay present, assess the position objectively, and find the best move available. That's mental discipline in action. And then there are the SEALs. Their entire selection process is designed to weed out people who can't maintain mental composure under extreme duress. During Hell Week, candidates are pushed to their absolute physical and psychological limits, running on minimal sleep, constantly wet and cold, performing complex tasks while exhausted. The instructors aren't just testing physical endurance, they're testing mental resilience, because in actual combat, physical strength means nothing if your mind collapses under pressure. The candidates who make it through are the ones who've learned to compartmentalize pain, manage fear, and stay mission-focused even when every cell in their body is screaming to quit. What all these high performers have in common is this: They've internalized the principle that your mind is either your greatest asset or your biggest liability, and they've made the decision to train it accordingly. They don't leave their mental state to chance. They don't hope they'll perform well when it matters. They systematically develop the psychological infrastructure needed to operate at peak capacity regardless of external conditions. And here's what's incredible. You don't need to become a SEAL or a grandmaster to benefit from these principles. You just need to start. Start with 5 minutes of focused breathing in the morning. Start by identifying one mental distraction and eliminating it. Start by asking yourself, is this thought serving me right now? And learning to let go of the ones that aren't. Small shifts in mental discipline compound into massive performance gains over time. So here's your final challenge. Comment the word discipline below. Then tell me, what's one area of your life where better mental control would completely change the game for you? Share it in the comments. If this video shifted something for you, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who's ready to level up their mental game. Because the more people who understand this, the stronger our community of high performers becomes.